Welcome to Books and Beyond with ThatGuyJae. I'm your host, ThatGuyJae. Real quick, we will start with the watch of the day, as we always do. Today, I am wearing the Casio G-Shock DW5600. It's kind of a gross wet weather day outside. This is usually my go-to when there is bad weather. It is built to last through just about everything, so I can just throw it on and know that it's going to be safe, even if I get rained on. And in my opinion, I don't think that you can really beat the classic 80s G-Shock styling. This one is built to look the most like the original G-Shock that came out in 1983. But yeah, anyway, on to the main topic of this week's episode. If you're watching this at the time of release, you may have noticed that I am several days later than I usually release the podcast, and the reason for that directly relates to today's topic. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about perfectionism, and specifically me struggling with perfectionism for probably all of my life. I've had different ideas for different topics I wanted to talk about. I even sat down to try and film one earlier in this week, and I just wasn't happy with how anything was coming out content-wise. I haven't been posting as much on TikTok because of the same reason. I feel slightly creatively blocked, but then I'm also just not happy with the results of the things that I have been making. A lot of this comes from the fact that I am often a perfectionist and usually very hard on myself, and it's something that I've always struggled with, and I think that it's something that a lot of people can relate to. I think one of the downfalls of perfectionism is that we get into these cycles of not completing things because we're not giving ourselves a chance to grow or improve or learn different skills. I recently saw someone say that the best way to get good at something is to be bad at it first. And you have to accept being bad at it. And that's the part that I've always struggled with. Most things that I've wanted to learn in my life, I've always just kind of beaten myself up if I wasn't instantly good at them. And I don't think many people get to live a life where they're just naturally good at things. Everybody has to be a beginner sometime. In recent years, I think I've done a better job at this, especially when it came to my content over the last year of posting on Book Talk. I'm almost at my 1-year anniversary of posting Book Talk videos, actually. But for some reason, the last couple weeks, I've just headed down that same mental spiral of just not liking my own things and then kind of judging myself because I'm not better at it. And, you know, you always hear the quote that comparison is the thief of joy. And I do think that that can very much be true. But I also think that it can be true about comparing yourself to yourself. It's really easy to fall into the bad habit of assuming you should be better at something or expecting to be better at something and then comparing yourself to that version of yourself that may not exist yet. It's not a fair comparison, and comparison is usually not a good thing. Having this slight delay in my creative process is making me want to reevaluate my strategy and just try and keep improving. I think gradual improvement is perfectly fine and should be the goal instead of just jumping to being an expert at something. I also think that at times in my life, it's been hard to accept that I don't have to be an expert at something to enjoy it. I don't have to be great at something to find it valuable or even fun. Making book content and making this podcast has been a very fun hobby that I've added to my life over the last year. I've learned that I enjoy content creation quite a bit. And ultimately, I do need to remind myself that it is just for fun. If I'm not enjoying it, then I'm doing it wrong. So with this, I think one thing that I need to do is practicing a little bit more self-compassion. I need to stop beating myself up when I make editing mistakes or when I make a filming mistake or when I misspeak in one of my videos, and most likely no one noticed it but me. I've even reshot videos because I had a mustache hair out of place, and I doubt anyone cared enough to look at that, but I noticed it. And while it is good to aim for quality, you end up hurting yourself more by expecting it to be perfect, especially to be perfect every time. I really don't think that there is anything as perfect, and that's kind of the downfall of perfectionism. It's always great to strive to be better, but if you are striving to be perfect, you're never going to end up putting out anything, whether it be content or any of the hobbies in your life or even in your career. I always mix up this saying, so I might not get it exactly right, but it's something along the lines of like 95% is good enough, meaning that the amount of time that it would take to achieve the last 5% to reach perfect isn't worth it, because it could end up taking so long, and it could end up frustrating you so much that it completely takes away any joy in the project. I think I've always done kind of a poor job at that, because I do always push myself to try and make things more perfect. And I think a lot of the time certain things would have been good enough. I also think that I need to improve on being a beginner, because there's a lot of stuff that I'm learning even in relation to content creation. I had never really edited videos until I started this podcast, which this is episode 11. So I'm still very new at this. I just started using DaVinci Resolve a couple weeks ago, I think 2 episodes ago. So not only am I new to editing, but now I'm new to a different software. And it's close to the same, but it's definitely not exactly the same as what I was using before that. And I need to give myself a little grace. It's going to take me time to feel more comfortable with it. It's going to take me time to learn all the little tricks that are going to make my life easier. But overall, I have been happy with the last couple episodes. I think my editing is improving, and I think that's ultimately what's most important. I think another area that affects a lot of people, I know it for sure affects me, and that has to do with the shame of making mistakes. I think the people who do learn the most are the ones that can embrace their mistakes. The ones who are able to look at a mistake as a growth opportunity instead of something negative. I have often been stuck in the mindset of mistakes are bad, and mistakes discourage me instead of encouraging me, and it's probably slowed my learning process in a ton of areas. I know one huge example of this for me is language learning. I've always wanted to be bilingual or multilingual, and I've been learning Spanish on and off for years. And I've gotten so weighed down on the mistakes that I make with pronunciation that I end up frustrating myself and then taking these long breaks from learning. Whereas if I just stuck with it and continued to practice and learned to be okay with the fact that I might say something wrong and I might mispronounce it and people may not understand what I mean. But something that I've been trying to work into my belief system is worst case scenario. Trying to remember and think about what's the worst case scenario. In that situation, the worst case scenario is that I'm slightly embarrassed. Maybe somebody chuckles if I say the wrong word or if I say a word incorrectly. But ultimately, what I gained from that is by trying, I learned how to do it wrong, which then helps me get closer to doing it right. And I've done that across multiple different things throughout my life. That's just the first example that comes to mind. And this is going to end up being a slightly shorter episode, and I'm embracing that too, and I'm going to be okay with that, because my goal for the year is to get out a podcast episode every week. So if I get this out, even if it's a little bit late, even if it's a little bit shorter than previous weeks, it still counts. I'm still working towards that goal. Perfectionism is a dangerous cycle to get stuck in. It leads to a lot of self-doubt. It leads to a lot of missed opportunities. And it leads to a lot of stress and frustration. If you can relate to this at all, just know that you're not alone. I think there are a ton of us that have this issue. But second of all, you can always change it. You can always work through this. If you're trying to learn a new skill, keep adjusting the ways that you're trying to learn. And ultimately, this is something that I heavily need to do for myself. But stop with all of the self-doubt. For so long, I saw people make posts like, oh, just make the content. Just make the content. And for years, I didn't. And that was such true advice. Don't doubt yourself always. Don't set your expectations of yourself so high that you can never achieve them, because then you're never going to feel fulfilled. Keep working on the things you enjoy. Keep working on the things you want to do. And if you have to focus on being 1% better this week than last week, that's fine too. Any and all improvement is improvement. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of Books and Beyond with ThatGuyJae. As always, if you could like and share, and definitely leave a comment if this is something that you can relate to at all. Let others know how you've worked through or overcome struggles with self-doubt and perfectionism. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. But as always, thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your week to spend it with me, and I will see you in the next one.